We now have confirmation that the White House was, in fact, notified prior to these strikes on targets in Iran. And we want to go to CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, you are out there on the campaign trail. Let's discuss for just a moment how the decisions that Americans are making right now in terms of who they are going to put in the Oval Office, the implications that has for what is happening in the Middle East.
Well, and nowhere perhaps more acutely, Lana, than this state of Michigan where we are tonight. We are awaiting former President Donald Trump in Traverse City, Michigan. He is running behind schedule and is expected to be significantly behind schedule, having only left Texas in the last hour or so. He was supposed to start speaking about 45 minutes ago here. There are still several thousand people here in northern Michigan. But this issue has been a real personal one for people, especially in the Detroit area and in towns like Dearborn, Hamtramck, where there are significant numbers of Arab and Muslim Americans who are voters who've been in great anguish over the past year over what exactly to do, knowing that it was the Biden administration that stands by Israel and has allowed all this violence to continue, but also knowing that Donald Trump potentially is a personally dangerous choice for them, given policies he put in place when he was president and things he's threatened to do in the years since. Let me pass along one bit of White House news, since that's part of what this correspondent does.
Please.
We are told the president has been briefed on the situation in Israel, has been kept apprised of the details throughout the afternoon and this evening. He is now back at his home in Delaware, having been in Arizona earlier today for an event. Arrived home in Wilmington just a few minutes after Israel confirmed that it had conducted these military operations in Iran. The Secretary of State landed at Joint Base Andrews just moments after the strike was confirmed by Israel. He's back from meetings in the Middle East and in London earlier today with his counterparts about what to do exactly in response to all of this. And as we've reported through sources of Margaret Brennan's and Charlie D'Agata's and Ellie Watson's over at the Pentagon, the U.S. has been kept, of course, surprised of all this in the lead-up and had been working to delay and to sort of specify the response and ensure that it didn't necessarily hit Iranian nuclear targets or places related to its nuclear program, but perhaps the more specific military ones. But this will be an issue out here on the campaign trail in the coming days. Trump is here tonight and tomorrow. Vice President Harris is coming here to Michigan tomorrow because the Wolverine state starts voting early tomorrow. And there's real concern among Democrats that they may not be able to put together the right mix of voter to win this state again. And it usually requires traditional Democratic voters, union households in this state, African Americans, suburban types that are inclined to vote for Democrats. And yes, in and around Detroit and Dearborn and Hamtramck and other communities in Michigan, the Arab and Muslim voters who have traditionally voted for them, who are either withholding support, some might be voting for Trump instead, or voting for third-party candidates. We had a conversation last night with a handful that we'll be sharing through the weekend and into next week. Personally quite anguished about all of this, and yet knowing that they should be doing something. They should be voting and expressing their opinion, either to punish Harris or to stick it to her by voting for Trump, by not voting at all, or potentially voting for someone else. And it will be an issue in this state's Senate race, one of the more competitive ones. The Democrat Alyssa Slotkin running against the Republican Mike Rogers. It's been an issue for them as well, for the same reason, that there's such an influential block of voters that can swing elections in this state and who will be watching this over the weekend now, quite concerned again about members of their own community and their families in the region and the potential for widespread violence.
And we do know that there is a razor-thin margin for the House, the Senate, and the White House itself. Right. So all of this is going to have major implications. And let's stick with the White House for just another moment. We have a statement from the National Security Council. It doesn't say much, but we have that confirmation that the White House was, in fact, kept in the loop. Do we expect to hear anything from President Biden or Vice President Harris this evening?
We are not expecting anything currently from the president, given that we've been given what they call the lid, or essentially an end to his public day. That can always be lifted. But at this point and at this hour, it would seem unlikely he'd weigh in now. It's always possible he could do so tomorrow at some point. As for the vice president, she's the other one holding a big rally tonight down in Houston, Texas, of course, alongside the the Congressman Colin Allred, who's running in the U.S. Senate race, and of course alongside the well-known Texas musicians Willie Nelson and Beyonce. As of now, there's no indication she's going to weigh in on this tonight because the event she's holding is more specifically designed to talk about concerns with access to abortion procedures in Texas and across the country, and it's a message they're very eager to convey. So whether she says something in person or in writing later or tomorrow, we'll have to wait and see. But again, coming here to Michigan, where more than any other state, what's happening in the Middle East has been an issue, there's no way she can ignore it.
Ed O'Keefe there in the battleground covering the latest in terms of politics as well as what's happening in our nation's capital. Thank you, Ed. CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd has been sticking by us. So, Sam, let's recap what we know at this point. Tell us the latest.
We know that shortly ago, Israel launched retaliatory strikes into Iran against military targets. Both the Israeli Defense Forces and the National Security Council at the White House have emphasized that these are precision strikes, and again, against military targets, not against oil infrastructure or nuclear sites. These strikes by Israel are in retaliation for Iran launching an unprecedented number of ballistic missiles into Israel earlier this month. Where we are at this moment, Lana, is waiting to hear exactly what targets Israel struck and whether there are any associated threats facing U.S. personnel in the region. We have about 40,000 military personnel in the region, as well as likely hundreds of thousands of American citizens, many of whom are dual citizens living in the region. So at this time, again, we are waiting to hear what sites exactly were hit in Iran and whether there are any associated threats to U.S. personnel in the region.
And Sam, let's talk a little bit more about Secretary of State Antony Blinken having just been there in Israel earlier this week. How much do you think the U.S. knew about this? As we've all been discussing, Israel said that they plan to take retaliatory action. So at some level, it's not a surprise. The timing is what is surprising, and the extent of their targets is something that we're still trying to ascertain at this moment. But talk to us about Blinken, what he was doing there, and where the U.S. is hoping their influence, their exertion of influence might lead Israel in the next few days.
Well, I think it's important for our viewers to understand, because there are certainly some narratives circulating on social media and elsewhere that the Biden administration tried to tell Israel not to retaliate against Iran. And this has become a really politicized issue on the campaign trail as well. It is critical to note that almost immediately after Iran struck within Israel with an unprecedented number of ballistic missiles, President Biden and his administration voiced support for Israel's right to defend itself. The president, the national security advisor, and other officials did indicate publicly that they were in consultations with their Israeli counterparts about the scale and scope of Israel's response to Iran's attack, as well as the timing. We know that the United States sent an advanced missile defense system known as a THAAD, as well as 100 U.S. service members to Israel to help provide for Israel's defense since Iran's attack. And we also know that consultations between the United States and Israel have been ongoing. There is reporting that the United States did receive more of a heads up for this Israeli action than we have received for previous Israeli operations. So it looks like Israel and the United States discussed the scale and scope of timing of this operation for several weeks. Israel did not strike oil infrastructure and nuclear sites, which we have reporting the White House asked them not to do, but again, focused on precision strikes against military targets. I am not wholly surprised by the timing of this operation, Lana. It's been several weeks since Iran's retaliatory strike. It was unlikely that Israel was going to wait much longer to launch this attack. And while this attack did occur during Shabbat, which is a holy time for the Jewish people, this certainly isn't the first time that Israel has taken really life or death actions, military actions during Shabbat or during a holy period in order to defend itself.
Thank you, Sam. We also, as you're talking about Shabbat, it's also worth noting that there were many significant Jewish holidays that took place between the period in which Iran launched their strikes and when Israel has now responded. So perhaps that has something to do with the decision of timing. We're also hearing some unconfirmed reports at this point that there may have been also some strikes that were heard or explosions that were heard in areas like Syria. Are your sources saying anything about that, whether there was anything beyond Iran? The unconfirmed reports are that there might have been some explosions heard in Syria and Iraq as well.
I have not received any confirmed reports about additional Israeli operations tonight, Lana. However, we do know that over the past several weeks and months, Israel has launched direct strikes into Syria, Yemen, of course, Lebanon, and I believe Iraq, in order to strike Iranian proxy groups operating from those countries. They focused on targeting weapons infrastructure, weapons warehouses and silos, as well as senior officials leading terrorist organizations in those countries. So it would be wholly unsurprising if Israel did take those additional actions tonight in order to diminish the threat from Iran. This strike into Iran is just one part of a multi-pronged strategy by Israel to diminish the threat from Iran and its proxies to Israel's security.
And it is worth noting that those are unconfirmed. What we do have confirmed at this point from the IDF is that they have taken strategic action, according to them, on military targets in Iran in response, retaliatory, as you had said before, viewing this as a defensive action. And it is also worth reminding our viewers that in the moments ahead, there will be a lot of misinformation that will circulate online. We're already seeing some old footage circulating, so please be cautious about all that. We will tell you what we have been able to confirm and what we are trying to ascertain still in these moments. But Sam, one of the things that we do know is that this is a precarious moment. Talk to us more about the context of the stakes, where we find ourselves now, more than a year after those original October 7th terror attacks that took place in 2023, and where the primary actors are finding themselves in this moment in history.
Well, it's such an important question because during a moment like this, when there is such a historic event unfolding, an Israeli attack in Iran in response to an Iranian ballistic missile attack, it is easy to lose the big picture here. The big picture here is that over a year since October 7th, there remain various tracks ongoing to try to resolve the conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, the West Bank, as well as multiple efforts to diminish Iran's ability to strike into Israel. At the same time, there's a whole track focused on increasing humanitarian aid into Gaza in light of the dire situation there. So on the diplomatic side, Lana, we understand that the CIA Director Bill Burns is traveling to the region to try to really reignite momentum for hostage release and ceasefire talks. There still are reportedly about 100 hostages in Hamas custody, and efforts to secure their release have stalled. So we have a diplomatic track focused on hostage releases and potentially a ceasefire as well. At the same time, the United States Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State have sent a letter to their Israeli counterparts indicating that if humanitarian aid into Gaza does not increase to 350 trucks a day within now, I suppose, about 3 weeks, that the United States will diminish to some degree its military assistance to Israel. So that's happening as we speak as well. We also know that there are multiple efforts, both diplomatic and, of course, military operations as well, to diminish Hamas, Hezbollah, and other Iranian proxies' capabilities and intent to strike into Israel. There's a diplomatic track on that, but at the same time, Israel, of course, is launching operations to strike those proxy groups, to strike their leadership, to strike their fighters, to diminish their communications and capabilities. And we don't really see an end in sight for those efforts by Israel to strike Iranian proxies in light of the incredibly virulent threat that those proxy groups strike. So many different pieces to the puzzle, Lana. I've just named a few. The world is certainly watching to see whether there is really any pause in the actual violence unfolding, but there's so many different theaters where conflict is active right now that that's going to be a tricky nut to crack.
And in so many ways, now these active conflicts are things that we are watching and reporting on, but they have been simmering conflicts essentially as long as human history has been recorded. So these are not easy solutions. There are not easy answers to any of this, but we appreciate you providing your insights. Sam Vinograd, thank you.
Thank you.
We will continue to follow these updates in the Middle East throughout the night and the weekend. We do know at this point that Israel has launched retaliatory strikes against Iran. They say that they are military in nature, that they are targeting only military assets, but are not targeting oil reserves or anything nuclear, those being requests coming from the Biden administration. President Biden at this moment has been briefed and is said to be closely watching the developments.